grade 9th and grade 10th, welcome to today's English session. And in today's English session, I shall be taking up the topic called Angel in Disguise by T.S. Author. Already the voice recording I have sent about the author, but still I would like to give a brief of his once again. So, here T.S. Author, who has written An Angel in Disguise, was a most popular 19th century American writer, and his writing consisted of compassion and sensitivity. His articles were full of, his stories were full of compassion and sensitivity, and his stories had values which were associated with respectable middle class people in America. Now let us get into the story. Now the story, An Angel in Disguise, revolves around a physically disabled child. Now the disabled child is the main character in this story, around which the story revolves. Then the characters in the story are Joe Thompson and Mrs. Thompson. Then we have the children characters in the form of John, Katie and Maggie. Then we have another two adult characters, Jones and Ellis. Then a reference has been made to the dead mother of the children. And the scene takes place, the scenes in this story is set in two places, one in the Howell and one at Thompson's home. Now in this small introduction, children, now let me come to the story. The story begins with the description of a hovel. Hovel means hut. And that hut, four characters were living. One was the lady, one was a lady who was characterless, and the lady had three children, one son and two daughters, and the eldest son name was John, the girl's name was Kate, and the youngest girl's name was Maggie. So the woman who was characterless, who had been framed as a characterless lady in that village, had three children by the name John, Katie and Maggie. Maggie was the youngest, John was the eldest and Katie was the second eldest. Now here what happens, one day the mother of the children, she had drunk very heavily and she came and collapsed on the threshold of her hole. So her hole was in a very bad condition. It was in such a bad condition that there was only enough of space for all these four souls to live inside. Now slowly the news started spreading around the village that the characterless lady had passed away. So when the news had spread by word of mouth, all the people in the village, they gathered around the hovel. And though they were very bitter about the characterless lady, but yet sympathy had got into their mind on seeing the dead lady lying in front of the entrance of the house. And what made their mind sympathize was that she had left three children helpless. That is in the form of John, Katie and Maggie. When all the people, they were coming and observing the three children as well as the dead lady lying down there, one of the main characters by the name Mr. Joe Thompson had arrived at the hovel, and Joe Thompson arrived at the hovel and he was watching this scene with a very sad feelings in his mind. While this was going on, two other elderly characters by the name Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones also had arrived. He was a farmer. He was a farmer. So he arrived at the scene, and when he arrived at the scene, he decided to take John. Jones, the farmer, decided to take John along with him so that he can take care of his life. And another lady by the name Alice, she also appeared at the hovel, and she decided to take the girl called Kitty. And Kitty was a mischievous girl, but Alice decided that Kitty would be molded as a responsible girl, and she will take the responsibility of molding Kitty. So she took away Kitty. So John was taken away by Jones, and Kitty was taken away by Alice. Now starts the climax in the story. What is the climax? The climax is that the dead mother is lying down there, and Maggie, she was physically disabled. What made her physically disabled? One day she fell down from a window and she had damaged her spinal cord. Since then, she was immobilized. So she was confined to the bed. And the scene described by the author is so sad. That is, the children hardly had any clothing on their body to cover their body. So the people who had come down there, they had gathered some clothing and they covered up all these children. And finally, it was decided that the dead mother's body was to be taken for the final rites. So the next day, a carriage had come, and in that carriage, the body of the dead mother was loaded and was taken away to the graveyard for burial. But nobody followed the carriage. Nobody followed the carriage to the burial ground, because she was a characterless woman. However, John was taken away by Jones, and Katie was taken away by Alice. Now the only child remaining in the hovel, in the broken hut, was Maggie. She was just sitting down there and watching what was going on. She was sad. One could observe the sadness in her face. Now the most affected person was Mr. Joe Thompson. Joe Thompson was a wheelwright. Wheelwright means he had a small carriage where he used to prepare small carts for children, and he used to repair the wheels. And he used to do this repairing in a free manner for the children. He never charged the children, and children loved him. So now Mr. Jones, he looked at Maggie. And when Jones looked at Maggie, Maggie cried, "Oh, please don't leave me. Please take me. I'm left alone. Please don't leave me." Now this touched the heart of Mr. Jones. And Jones, as he loved children, he decided to take the child in his strong arms. He took the child in his strong arms and went to his home. But on the contrary, his wife was of different nature. Since the Thompsons were childless, his wife hated child. Because she didn't have a child for a very long period of time. And so the moment she saw Joe Thompson carrying the child and coming home, she asked him arrogantly as to why did he bring the child here? To which Joe Thompson replied that people in the hovel, they said that she could be sent to the poorhouse. Poorhouse means a place where orphaned children would be taken care of. So he said to her, people in the hovel were talking about sending her to the poorhouse. Now his wife responded, why Joe Thompson brought her to home? Why can't he go to the poorhouse and leave the child there? But then Joe Thompson had already decided that this child will be there under his care at his home. So he kept on convincing his wife. He kept on convincing his wife. So one day he just left the child in his chamber on a neat bed, on a soft, cozy bed, and he went off to his workshop. And when he went off to his workshop, and when he returned back in the evening, he found something very surprising happening. There was a change in the attitude, arrogant attitude of his wife. His wife was sitting and talking with a small child, and he observed all this activity through a window, where his wife's back was towards the window, but he could see the child's face. Then when he entered the home, he never entered into the chamber. He directly entered into the kitchen, and he was looking for, and he was asking his wife, was the supper ready? Was the supper ready? For which, hearing to the foot sound of Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Thompson hurriedly came into the kitchen, and she prepared some supper. And she said to Thompson that the child could be given supper after they had finished it. So after finishing supper, she took bread and milk to the child, and the child hungrily took that bread and milk. Now Mr. Thompson was very pleased, and later on Mr. Thompson went close to the child, lifted her arms, and inquired her about her health. And he was inquiring the child, was she feeling any kind of pain? The child said she was feeling pain, but now she didn't feel pain at all, because she was in the softest hand, the most caring hands of Mr. Thompson. So this small child gradually changed the attitude of Mrs. Thompson from arrogancy to calmness, and slowly Mrs. Thompson accepted the child, and so ultimately Mr. Thompson succeeded in getting the child to his home, and coming of this sick child to the home was a big blessing to Mr. Thompson's family. And since it was a big blessing, why it was a big blessing? It was a big blessing because they didn't have children for a long period of time. So here, though the child was a sick child, a disabled child, but still it was a child in the form of an angel in the house of Mr. Thompson. And my dear children, this is the reason the story's title is called An Angel in Disguise. An Angel in Disguise. Disguise means in something in a hidden form. See, this child was disabled, but it proved to be an angel. It proved to be a gift of God for the Thompson's family, who was childless for many, many years. That is the reason the story is titled as An Angel in Disguise. Thank you, children, for listening to my story.